Aircraft Graveyard. Located at the Davis-Monthan Air Base in Arizona, is one of the largest aircraft graveyards in the world. Over 4,000 aircraft of all varieties have been gathered here since World War II, all lined up and neatly parked in rows. These make up the 309th Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group, AMARG. It's commonly known as the Boneyard, and the US Air Force began keeping its supply of aircraft there in 1946. At first, it was used for Air Force aircraft only, but beginning in 1962, planes from the Navy, Army, and government agencies were brought here as well. Because Arizona's hot and dry with minimal humidity and rain, the planes take longer to rust and deteriorate. At the base, there are planes dating back years and models of different shapes and sizes. Fighters, commercial jets, helicopters, and small planes are among them. Some are new and some are older and can no longer fly. One worth noting is the Boeing 707 of Pan Am. It was the most important international airline in the US from the 1930s until it went bankrupt in 1991. Many of the planes have their windows, doors, and other vulnerable sections secured. That being said, just because they're covered does not mean they're useful. Several aircraft to sent to this location are deconstructed and their parts are reused. 7. Red Army Tank. In 2015, workers uncovered an abandoned Red Army tank in a marsh in Seno, Belarus. The tank dates back to 1941, known as a KV-1 or Klement Voroshilov-1, after a Soviet Union marshal. The KV-1 was the Soviet military's primary heavy tank when the Germans invaded in 1941. Its large armored plate made it particularly effective against most German anti-tank weaponry. Salvage personnel worked together to rescue the tank after it had been submerged in the marsh for almost 70 years. The tank turret was upside down and split from the chassis during the procedure, indicating that the vehicle was riddled with electrical charges. It's unknown if the tank was intentionally wrecked before it became stuck in the mud, or if the damage occurred after the tank became stuck. The chassis also showed traces of suspected fire damage. The tank might have been employed at the Battle of Seno during World War II, which involved around 2,250 tanks in all. 6. Landing Craft Tank 326. In 1943, the British warband Landing Craft Tank 326 LCT vanished with 14 crewmen on board. Army commanders decided that it was most likely destroyed by poor weather or a mine and sank somewhere off the coast of the Isle of Man. Last year, marine experts discovered the ship off the coast of Bardsley Island in northern Wales. It was discovered 25 miles south of where scientists thought it had always been. According to new research, the vessel's escort ship, HMS Cotillion, last saw LCT-326 in the region where it was discovered, despite official records saying it sank off the Isle of Man. The wreckage was found split in two, 300 feet below the surface of the ocean. Although its identification was unknown when the news broke, odds are it is LCT-326, given the ship lies directly in the route of the flotilla it was traveling with when it vanished. The buried vessel is 190 feet long and 33 feet wide, matching the measurements of the LCT-326. LCT-326 and others looked like it were designed to land armored vehicles and take part in amphibious operations like D-Day. The freshly found ship looks to have gone down in stormy waves, breaking in half before sinking to its ultimate resting place. 5. SS Thistlegorm. SS Thistlegorm was built by Joseph Thompson and Sons in England and was launched in June 1940. The 415-foot steamship was powered by a triple expansion 3-cylinder engine with 1,850 horsepower. When the ship was called to serve the war effort, a 4.7-inch anti-aircraft gun and a heavy-caliber machine gun were added to the stern of the ship. On June 2, 1941, SS Thistlegorm set sail from Glasgow bound for Alexandria, Egypt on her fourth and last journey. The ship was supposed to deliver much-needed equipment to British soldiers in northern Africa. It stated that the ship was only carrying motor parts, but in reality, it was loaded up with everything ranging from boots and rifles to freight cars and motorcycles. At some point during the Thistlegorm's journey to the Red Sea, German intelligence received reports of a large troop transport ship in the area. 2 German bombers dropped 2 bombs, striking the ship's cargo hold. Because the ship was loaded up with all kinds of ammunition, this resulted in an explosion strong enough to get the enemy's attention. 2 days later, the enemy returned and sank Thistlegorm. 9 of the 42 men on board were killed. In the 90s, the site became a popular wreck diving destination. The wreck is broken into 2 pieces, with the stern twisted 90 degrees, lying on its port side at 105 feet. The bow sits upright at about 52 feet. The ship is still packed with vehicles, weapons, and other paraphernalia from World War II. Would you like to dive down and see this wreck site? Let us know in the comments, and hit subscribe while you're at it. 4. The tanks of Flamenco Beach. After Spain surrendered Puerto Rico to the United States in 1901, President Theodore Roosevelt assigned all public land on Culebra to the Navy. This land was utilized for test landings and ground maneuvers, as well as bombing practice beginning in 1936. Equipment and weapons were brought to the island despite there being no facility, and bombing practice went on for decades. In 1969, missiles struck the island as training for the war in Vietnam went on for Navy pilots. The Navy's usage of the islands did not sit well with the people, who began to push back when the military sought to remove the whole population. Culebra people initiated non-violent protests in the summer of 1970 with the intention of eliminating the island's naval occupation. They marched, had sit-ins, and set up barricades. After 7 months of protesting, the Navy finally decided to scale down on its use of the island for testing and training. By 1975, Culebra was free of Navy training. Though most of it was cleared away, the massive tanks were immobile and were just left to rust. The salty sea breezes corroded the metal, causing it to rust and collapse, and the villagers repainted the abandoned hulks. The tanks are still there now and have become a distinctive feature on the otherwise immaculate beach. New graffiti is constantly being placed on top of the old, giving the ancient war machines an almost joyous new lease of life. 3. Covenanta in Vineyard. Denbigh, an English wine estate, has uncovered a pretty unique feature of its land in the form of an abandoned World War II tank. The tank was known as the Covenanta, a sort of light cruiser tank that served as the British Army's backbone in the early years of the war. The Covenanters, who were rather weakly equipped and undergunned, were practically outdated as soon as they were launched in 1938 and were obsolete by 1940. They saw little to no active service outside of the UK and were primarily used to re-equip British units as the army redeveloped after Dunkirk. They were also used for training by British and Commonwealth armoured units before being replaced by newer British models such as the Churchill and Cromwell, and also the famous American Sherman. One shot looks to have blasted the turret completely off, since it was not retrieved with the tank's main chassis. However, after a little more digging, it was discovered and reunited with its parent cadaver. It was said that when it was time for the Canadians to go home, they buried their tanks instead of taking them home. In 1983, at least one more tank was discovered underground in the vicinity and removed. It's presently housed at the Bovington Tank Museum in Dorset, where it's been restored to its former splendor. 2. H.L. Hunley. On August 12, 1863, the H.L. Hunley landed at Charleston, escorted by James McClintock and Gus Whitney, one of the sub's financiers. The Hunley was soon tested in Charleston Harbor by the crew. Frustrated with McClintock's speed, the Confederates captured the Hunley submarine and handed it over to Lieutenant John Payne, a Navy officer attached to the CSS Chicora. The Hunley was anchored at Fort Johnson on August 29th, preparing to sail for her first attack on the blockade when it sank at the dock. There are contradictory accounts of what occurred. Some said that the wake of a passing ship filled the Hunley's open hatches with enough water to sink it. Others said that the mooring lines of another ship became entangled with the sub, pushing it onto its side and submerging its hatches. Whichever occurred, the consequences were the same. The Hunley sank quickly, killing 5 of their crew. Payne, who was on top of the submarine, leaped into the ocean and was rescued. Charles Hasker, imprisoned by the hatch cover, rowed the sub to the bottom before releasing himself and swimming to the surface, while William Robinson escaped through the aft hatch. The retrieval of the submarine took weeks, during which time Horace Hunley arrived in Charleston and asked that the submarine be delivered to him. General P.G.T. Beauregard authorized the request, and Hunley dispatched a new crew of soldiers. Horace Hunley planned a boat display in Charleston Harbor on October 15th. He said that his ship would dive beneath the CSS Indian Chief and emerge on the other side. The submarine was never seen again once it vanished beneath the waves. Divers did not retrieve the H.L. Hunley until November 7th. It was discovered deep in the channel, its bow submerged in muck and its stern floating. When the doors were opened, a terrible scene unfolded, with the second crew members appearing frozen in time. Thomas Park was discovered in the aft conning tower. Horace Hunley was in the front conning tower still clutching a lantern. The rear ballast tank valve was left open, allowing the submarine to fill with water according to rescuers. The tool required to activate the seacock was discovered on the submarine's bottom, prompting them to assume Hunley had either forgotten to close the valve or had misplaced the wrench and wasn't able to do so. The keel weights on the sub had been partially released, indicating that the crew understood they were in danger, but were too late to save themselves. 1. The Ghost Fleet of Mallows Bay. The greatest shipwreck fleet in the Western Hemisphere is half sunk and decomposing on the Maryland bank on the Potomac River, just west of Chesapeake Bay. Hundreds of US boats were taken to Mallows Bay in the early 20th century to be destroyed and scrapped, and the remnants may still be seen in the shallow water today. When the United States entered World War I, the tale of the vessels at Mallows Bay began. The United States possessed ships, but a lack of transport boats prompted President Woodrow Wilson to sanction the biggest construction program in history in April 1917. An order for 1,300-foot-long steamships to be completed in less than 18 months, with each ship costing the public about $1 million. The shipbuilders were on a time limit and had a lot to do, so to speed up the process and save money, they used wood instead of expensive steel. In October 1918, a congressional report showed that a mere 134 ships were completed. It was over a year and a half into the program, which was not on schedule. A lot hadn't started yet, and 260 sat half-finished. Germany surrendered on November 11, 1918, and none of the ships had crossed the Atlantic. Until that point, the program paid for 731 wooden steamships. Despite the fact that 130 ships were completed, only 98 were delivered, and 76 of them were really only used to transport freight. The shipbuilding industry persisted after the war. The government received a total of 264 steamships in September 1919. Because the US no longer needed the ships, they were left to waste until it was established what else they could be used for. The 1960s saw a fresh attempt to clean up the region, with Congress succumbing to the demands of local watermen and granting an initial $350,000 budget for the Army Corps of Engineers to start cleaning up Mallows Bay. When it was revealed that the watermen had teamed up with a local power business to try to reclaim the area around Mallows Bay for private industry, the effort failed. A Maryland grant sponsored a study in March 1993 to explore the fleet at Mallows Bay and assess its disposal cost, environmental impact, and identify what boats remained for historical and archaeological interests. The researchers would locate 88 wooden ships left behind by the original EFC over the next 2 years. Researchers also revealed that Western Marine utilized the bay for more than simply EFC vessels. 12 barges, as well as a Revolutionary War-era longboat, 3 18th century schooners, and several workboats were uncovered. Thanks for watching. Which one of these military vehicles was your favorite? Let us know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.